working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. On today's headlines, ASEAN foreign ministers convened in Indonesia to address the pressing issue of the crisis in Myanmar. EU reaffirms commitment to free and open Indo-Pacific, calling for compliance with UNCLOS. In regional economic news, the ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office, or AMRO, maintains its positive outlook for the Philippines, projecting it to have the fastest economic growth among the ASEAN Plus 3 economies this year, despite facing external challenges. In the United Nations, ITU concludes its global summit on AI for Good. ASEAN foreign ministers convened in Indonesia to address the pressing issue of the crisis in Myanmar. However, the regional bloc remains divided on the approach to take regarding the ruling junta in the coup-ravaged country. According to an anonymous diplomat, ASEAN members were intensifying their efforts in the lead-up to the meeting, which serves as a prelude to a leaders' summit in September. The goal was to rally the group around the issue of Myanmar. However, the official expressed skepticism about achieving unity due to differing perspectives among a few members regarding the approach to the problem. Despite Myanmar's membership in ASEAN, the junta's failure to implement a 5-point plan agreed upon 2 years ago has led to their exclusion from high-level meetings. Adding to the divisions within ASEAN, Thailand recently hosted the foreign minister of the junta for controversial informal talks. Indonesia's foreign minister Retno Marsudi emphasized the importance of peace, stability, and prosperity in the region during her address at the gathering.
More than 5 decades, we have enjoyed peace, stability, and prosperity in our region. We cannot take this for granted. Peace does not fall from the sky. It is a result of a systematic effort to build an inclusive regional architecture, anchored in the habit of dialogue and cooperation.
Minister Marsudi expressed openness to cooperation while avoiding alienation.
ASEAN-led processes are a clear manifestation of this commitment. We have invested immensely and we must maintain it, particularly now amidst more complex challenges. So we have no choice but to show that ASEAN can navigate the regional and global dynamic.
The minister also stressed that ASEAN shouldn't become a pawn in the rivalry between major powers, emphasizing the need for a clear message that ASEAN will never serve as a proxy.
We need to send a clear message that ASEAN will never be a proxy in great powers' rivalry.
Marsudi highlighted the importance of ASEAN's role in constructing an inclusive regional architecture.
And ASEAN must be at the forefront in building inclusive regional architecture. We must emphasize any unilateralism must be building block for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. And this is why we need to expand our inclusive engagement with other regions, the whole strategic landscape of the Indo-Pacific.
In addition to the Myanmar crisis, the maintenance of peace and stability in the region was identified as a top priority. Minister Marsudi stated that preserving Southeast Asia as a region free of nuclear weapons is crucial for transforming it into the epicenter of growth.
The maintenance of peace and stability in the region is our priority. It is our foundation to turn the region into the epicentrum of growth. Therefore, we must keep Southeast Asia as a region free of nuclear weapons.
Various parties commemorated the 7th anniversary of the award of the Arbitral Tribunal in The Hague, which resulted from Manila's case against Beijing's excessive claims in the South China Sea. The European Union emphasized the award's significance as a legally binding milestone and a valuable foundation for peacefully resolving disputes among claimants and addressing concerns related to freedom of navigation. In a statement issued by the delegation of the European Union in the Philippines, the EU highlighted the importance of upholding the freedoms, rights, and duties established in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. The statement reiterated the EU's commitment to ensuring the freedoms of navigation and overflight, which are fundamental aspects of international law. Furthermore, the EU expressed its dedication to securing free and open maritime supply routes in the Indo-Pacific region in full compliance with UNCLOS for the benefit of all nations involved. On July 12, 2016, the tribunal constituted by the Permanent Court of Arbitration under Annex 7 to UNCLOS rendered its ruling in the arbitration case initiated by the Republic of the Philippines against the People's Republic of China regarding the South China Sea dispute, which was filed in 2013. The EU reaffirmed that the dispute settlement mechanisms outlined in UNCLOS play a vital role in maintaining and advancing the international order based on the rule of law. Meanwhile, the United States has called on China to adhere to international law and cease its routine harassment of foreign personnel operating in the expansive South China Sea. Now, this statement comes as the U.S. commemorated the 7th anniversary of the 2016 Arbitral Award, which addressed contested waters in the region. In a statement issued by the U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller, reaffirmed Washington's policy regarding maritime claims in the South China Sea, outright rejecting and deeming as unlawful Beijing's claims over a significant portion of the area. The U.S. urged Beijing to align its maritime claims with international law, particularly in accordance with the 1982 Law of the Sea Convention. It called for an end to China's routine harassment of vessels lawfully operating within their respective exclusive economic zones and emphasized the need to halt disruptions to state sovereignty rights related to natural resource exploration, exploitation, conservation, and management. Additionally, the U.S. urged China to cease interfering with the freedoms of navigation and overflight for states lawfully operating in the region. The U.S. has been a staunch supporter of the Philippines' territorial integrity in the West Philippine Sea. Based on the 2016 Arbitral Award and the UN's Convention on the Law of the Sea, Washington has provided financial and technical assistance to the country, including initiatives targeting unregulated and illegal fishing, as well as joint military training to enhance the interoperability of their respective forces in addressing various challenges. According to Washington, the ruling under the UNCLOS is final and legally binding on both the Philippines and China. Now, meantime, we turn our attention to the United States, where President Joe Biden has declared a state of emergency in the northeastern state of Vermont. The declaration comes in response to heavy rains that have led to severe flooding, necessitating the rescue of dozens of residents by boat. Vermont is facing a dire situation as a slow-moving storm system has caused widespread flooding across multiple towns after a deluge of over 9 inches of rain on Monday. The state experienced one of the worst floods in nearly a century. Roads and communities have been completely submerged, and officials warn that the situation may worsen before it improves. In the state capital of Montpelier, a potentially dangerous situation is unfolding as one of the dams providing flood protection nears its capacity. The Wrightsville Dam, located on the Winooski River, is currently at maximum capacity, according to city officials. Due to the escalating risk, city officials in Montpelier have issued an emergency health order, closing the downtown area until at least noon on Tuesday. And this will allow authorities to assess safety risks and initiate cleanup efforts. Montpelier Mayor Jack McCullough described the situation as the second largest flood the city has ever experienced, with the historic flood of 1927 being the only one worse, affecting much of the state. Meanwhile, in Vilnius, Lithuania, for the NATO summit, President Joe Biden has approved an emergency declaration for Vermont, authorizing the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, to coordinate disaster relief efforts. Vermont Governor Phil Scott describing the situation as historic and catastrophic.
Make no mistake, the devastation and flooding we're experiencing across Vermont is historic and catastrophic. Floodwaters continue to rise in some places, like our capital city, and have surpassed levels seen during Tropical Storm Irene.
In the neighboring Canadian province of Quebec, over 600 individuals have been forced to evacuate their homes due to torrential rains. Within a span of 48 hours, the Montmorency Forest near Quebec City experienced a deluge of nearly 5.5 inches of rain, resulting in a rapid rise in river levels. And the slow-moving storm system that unleashed devastating rainfall in Vermont also brought deadly flooding to various northeastern states, including New York. The Hudson Valley in New York was particularly hard hit with tragic consequences. One woman lost her life on Sunday amid the flash flood.
We also lost an individual's life. A young woman, 35 years old, who came out seeing that her house was taking on too much water, was with her dog, and her fiancé literally saw her swept away. Terror, devastation, right here, less than 24 hours ago.
In response to the dire situation, New York Governor Kathy Hochul declared a state of emergency for Orange County late Sunday, acknowledging the severity of the flash floods. Approximately an hour later, Hochul expanded the state of emergency to include Ontario County, located southeast of Rochester, due to the significant flooding occurring in the area. Highlighting the urgency of the climate crisis, Hochul emphasized, make no mistake, this is our new normal.
To fight the ravages of climate change, because again, these are unprecedented weather events that keep hitting us over and over and over again.
According to Trooper Stephen Neville of the New York State Police, numerous bridges have collapsed and many roads are impassable, including the heavily traveled Palisades Interstate Parkway in the affected region. In regional economic news, the ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office, or AMRO, maintains its positive outlook for the Philippines, projecting it to have the fastest economic growth among the ASEAN Plus 3 economies this year, despite facing external challenges. AMRO's forecast reveals that the Philippines is expected to achieve the highest gross domestic product growth rate in the region for 2023, with a projected growth of 6.2%. This is followed by Cambodia at 5.7% and China at 5.5%.
Philippines has done really very well in terms of sustaining its growth. So I think that's partly because of the structure of the economy is quite different from the other ASEAN economy. The ASEAN economies are much more dependent on manufacturing goods export, whereas in the case of Philippines, it's much more service-driven economy. And because of that, I think it has not been affected as much by the headwind from external headwind, and has benefited from the recovery in the services sector. So we expect growth this year to remain about the same as previously, at 6.2%, I think.
Now, looking ahead, AMRO also maintains a positive growth projection of 6.5% for the Philippines next year. In broader regional economic trends, AMRO expects the ASEAN Plus 3 region to grow by 4.6% in 2023, with an additional growth of 4.5% projected for next year. Mr. Kaur expressed our optimism about the region's bounce back.
We expect the region to expand quite robustly by 4.6% this year, notwithstanding the headwind. And this will be driven mostly by domestic demand. And it will be boosted by the recovery in tourism sector, which will offset to some extent the goods exports.
For ASEAN alone, AMRO revised its GDP economic forecast for 2023 to 4.5% from the previous 4.9%, primarily due to the impact of weaker external demand on Singapore and Vietnam.
Singapore growth, has been reduced from 2% to 1.3%, and for Vietnam, it's gone down from 6.8 to 4.4, and this is again mainly because of the outturn in the first quarter. As you know, both Singapore and Vietnam are highly exposed to manufacturing exports, and manufacturing export is still very weak across the region.
However, AMRO projects ASEAN to expand by 5.3% in 2024. Despite positive projections, Mr. Kor cautioned that downside risks remain a concern.
Well, as I mentioned, I think there's several potential shocks to the region, the risks that I identified in the risk map. The major one will be the recession, the potential recession in the US and Europe, and if materialize, it will dampen export demand and be a drag on growth further. And the second is a weaker than expected growth in China, which we actually don't expect. We think is a small likelihood. Also, the risk of financial spillover from the US because of the tight monetary policy that I mentioned. And then in the medium term, the risk of economic decoupling becoming broader and affecting more than just high-tech products, but also other products as well. I think if that happens, that would have a significant impact on the region.
Shifting focus to inflation, AMRO maintains its forecast of 5.9% for Philippine inflation this year. Mr. Kor explained that although inflation rose more sharply than expected last year, it's currently on a downward trajectory due to the high base at the beginning of the year. And AMRO anticipates inflation to remain at a similar level to last year for the whole of 2023.
And inflation, on the other hand, increased more sharply than we had expected last year. And on the other hand, it's coming off very sharply now. Although because of the high base in the beginning of the year, we expect inflation for the whole year to be about the same as as last year. I think it's 5.8%, but I don't have the number in front of me, as unfortunately.
Across the ASEAN Plus 3 and ASEAN regions, inflation rates are expected to settle at 6.3% and 7.8% respectively for this year.
This chart shows the inflation outlook for the region. Inflation has come off from its peak last year, but they are still relatively elevated point. And on the right hand side, you see commodity prices have also come off the peak. So inflation is coming down quite nicely. In fact, it's come down faster than we expected, although they're still above the inflation target for most of the countries in the region.
Governments, policymakers, industry leaders, academics, scientists, technology innovators, civil society, and the UN community met in Geneva, Switzerland for 2 days to discuss the future of artificial intelligence. Now, the summit convened by the International Telecommunications Union, or ITU, focused on finding practical applications of AI to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Participants discussed the need for guardrails and global AI governance frameworks. A variety of ideas related to the future of AI were presented at the summit, and these include setting up a registry of new or anticipated AI applications, a global observatory on AI, and new institutional bodies. Participants also proposed to empower existing organizations that may already have the expertise and structures to tackle challenges brought on by AI.
It's about making the right choice, right? We have to make the right choice, and I think it's time for us to roll up our sleeves, and we need to analyze what's feasible, what's already available, and of course, what can be done. And that's what you've called on us to do. And I think it puts us on a path. You mentioned that, Jennifer. We need to have this path. So it really puts us on a path to be able to create a roadmap for the short term, for the medium term, and also, of course, for the long term. From the ITU perspective, of course, we will continue to do our part. We will continue to focus on AI standards development, policy assistance. We will also be integrating AI capacity support into our digital transformation offerings, together with partners like UNDP and others, especially in countries with low technological capabilities. This is another thing, even Ambassador.
ITU is committed to AI standards development and capacity building, supporting responsible AI development and deployment, and driving strong collaboration with all stakeholders. The organization is working to integrate AI capacity support into its digital transformation offerings, and its undertaking sector focused AI readiness work in critical areas such as health, smart mobility, and smart cities. ITU Secretary General Mulin Xiao said that the work on AI at ITU, the UN system, and society as a whole should only grow in intensity. The summit concluded with a call for action to ensure that AI is used for good and to mitigate the risks associated with its development and use. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angela. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.